I think Bregman's holding out. It obviously no one has met his price yet, or at least not a team that he wants to go to. And so he's kind of deciding between, do I take the longer deal or do I take something a little bit more creative with the Cubs that maybe allows me to hit the market a little bit sooner? And I think that's what's holding up the whole works right now.
Well, I'm not really sure how good he is. That's
Yeah,
really, and I don't know about
I'm down on him personally.
Right.
Yeah.
I am too. I don't know about the fit and fit with the park necessarily and how pull happy he's been, trying to jump fastballs and the on base number, it's I don't know what you want to pay, what you want to commit to somebody who is making too many outs.
Yeah, I mean the issue for me is, well, it's manifold, but realistically you're looking at the nature of the team right now, as far as we understand it, is that payroll is kind of at a premium. And so adding Bregman at the presumed cost of around $30 million puts the Cubs right at the penalty level that they don't want to exceed for the second straight year. The common thinking is that they'd have to trade Nico Horner. Do you get the right deal for him because you're not leveraged, but you're effectively replacing in a different manner, but the same level of total production at a much higher cost, and at the risk that you'll lose Bregman, assuming that such a short deal has to have an opt-out after 1 year. So this might only be a rental. Not to mention, he turned down a qualifying offer, so the Cubs would lose their second pick, their fifth pick, and $1 million in international free agency money. So when you put that all together, it'd be one thing if you were the Dodgers or you're somebody else and you're heavily favored and you need one piece and you've got more in the pipeline. Making a deal like this could very well put the Cubs in a position to where they're mortgaging their future and having to replace multiple everyday players in addition to the other losses that they have to make it work. I don't see a way that even if he performs at the highest level of expectation, that the Cubs end up winning this maybe beyond 2025.
Well, the elephant in the room then becomes, because we just heard from Jed Hoyer talking about the fact that he's entering the last year of his contract. Does this even get looked at if he's not entering the last year of his contract based on all the things you just said and the future ramifications?
I don't think so. I can't imagine, for all we've heard, the only thing we've heard the whole time, in addition to, threading the needle and producing a consistently competitive team, which I guess they have been consistent, 83 wins in back-to-back years, just not really competitive. So this seems very different. I mean, the Tucker move, even getting Isaac Paredes last year was outside the norm for Hoyer. And now you've got the Tucker move for a guy who may not be around. They traded for Ryan Presley, who's gone after next year. And so there's all these things that don't fit with what we've seen from Jed Hoyer's MO in the past. And this would be another one even bigger, to basically saying, hey, we're pushing all in. And it's either it works and I get a new gig, or it doesn't, and it's somebody else's mess to clean up next year and beyond.
Let's talk about the Turner thing. Even though he's made his bones as a third baseman, he doesn't play there anymore.
Very little. I think he's got like 90 innings over the last 2 years combined, and those were not good innings from a defensive standpoint. I mean, good for him still being able to play the game at 40 years old, but that's more on the offensive side. And realistically, offensively, he's pretty comparable to what you'd get from Bregman's production, at a fraction of the cost, albeit that if they were to pivot there, to me, more than anything else, that's saying we believe in Matt Shaw. Right, they don't have any other big options there. They've already kind of lined up some veteran backups, but when you're looking at Justin Turner, you're talking about a guy who's basically a first base DH at this point. So you do solidify first base behind.
Yeah, they
Michael
need
Busch,
that. They definitely need somebody behind Busch, because I don't know who that is right now.
Well, yeah, I think that's why it works though. If you were to get Turner, because it's not just a third base fill-in, you could still put Matt Shaw at third base, and he could just kind of bop around and fill in where you need to fill in. You need a bat that can do some things.
The problem is, and I think this is how they're looking at it, if it's not Bregman, is there a third base backstop, is somebody who is above replacement level if Shaw falls flat on his face?
Not really. I mean, that's, they've kind of gone into this whole offseason. You look at some of the acquisitions, whether it was Vidal Brujan, whether it's Gage Workman in the Rule 5, whether it's John Birdie, they've added a bunch of guys who all feel kind of a similar piece in terms of, hey, fine if you got to use them for a day or so to give a guy a day off, but not someone who you want to be an everyday type of player. And as those options have run out otherwise, I don't really think there's anybody out there that you look at and say, yep, we're cool with this guy being our everyday third baseman. And you look at it, and the Cubs have jettisoned like 6 third basemen since the trade deadline of last year. They're getting rid of all of their organizational depth for all intents and purposes. And so it's got to kind of be Shaw or bust unless they do the Bregman deal.
I guess what I'm looking at and what I'm hearing from you is that they have a bunch of lottery style scratch offs, and they're just small scratch offs, not anything that's going to get you the Powerball or anything with all those names that you just mentioned. And I'm just curious, what is your level of confidence in Matt Shaw being a productive, above average first baseman or third baseman as a rookie?
Yeah, so I try my best not to be like the prospect hugger and hype
Right.
man in that regard. But that said, I mean, Matt Shaw is one of my favorite prospects that's come up through the system in a long time. And I was talking to a scout recently, somebody who knows his game well, who knows his former coach at the University of Maryland well, and he told me he believes Matt Shaw is the best hitter in minor league baseball. All around, right? A lot of people can argue different statistics there, but I look at the things he's done, the way he's leaned into things like motor preferences to make some adaptations to his swing. And I look at how much he's grown defensively as a third baseman. You listen to the things that Mike Scioscia said about him during the Premier 12 tournament. I'm all in on this guy. Like I really, really believe he can be a keystone piece, not to confuse that with second baseman. We'll just say a cornerstone piece for the Cubs moving forward, whether it's at third or they end up, moving him for whatever reason. But yeah, I'm all in on him.
I think for me, as I'm looking at this from the outside, looking into the Cubs organization and understanding that Jed Hoyer is in the position that he's in, I think it makes sense that he's trying to get all these insurance plays, if you will, but that Matt Shaw is the guy he should be leaning into to give him a fair shot at starting the season at third base. But I think I'm in the minority on that, and I'm okay with that. I just wonder about the Jed Hoyer kind of overlording it and trying to get everything just right, because his job is literally on the line based on how this season goes.
Yeah, but I mean, and I noted this earlier, but the phrase that we've heard over and over and over from Hoyer since he took over, and even before, so I think, is threading the needle, right? And we
that's
could,
hard to do.
Right, it is, and especially when you're trying to do it over and over and over again. I literally tried to thread a needle the other day to sew something up, and it was not a great deal of fun.
Yeah, that
took you a bunch of times, right?
That's why they use that particular metaphor.
I think he's down to his last chance to thread said needle, and you miss. You got to do it. You got to try again. He's out of tries.
Yeah, and I think though at some point you have to look at it and you say, well, we've done kind of this half measure thing for a while now. And so you got to shake that up, and it's either one way is going with a lot of these veterans, whether they're on short or long-term deals. The other way is handing it over to the prospects. They still haven't completely picked a lane there, but they do have enough of these guys on the come that there should be some impact players moving through the system, getting to Chicago, which they haven't really had, not in a really meaningful way since we saw that whole group come up, 2015, 2016, and we saw what happened there. So I think there's precedent for it, but Hoyer hasn't really felt like he's going to pull the trigger one way or the other on something big that's going to meaningfully reshape the franchise.
How do you assess the catching situation right now? Are they okay? Because we have seen them kind of try to chase in season last year, betting on another year of Yan Gomes overperforming was a bad bet.
Yeah, I mean, I think what we saw, and clearly for a while there, Miguel Amaya was not doing anything to make Yan Gomes expendable. I mean, Yan Gomes did enough of that on his own, but there wasn't anybody who could really take over. I think what we've seen, though, if we look at the second half, and a lot of those guys kind of started to figure some things out. If they get that version of Miguel Amaya, they're fine. I think they're good behind the plate as far as receiving and then at least getting nominal offense. The issue is that, as we've seen the last 2, 3, 4 years, there's not enough offense elsewhere on the field to let your catcher kind of be that deficient position like it used to be offensively. And so given the upgrades they've made, I think they gave themselves a little bit more room. But yeah, again, if Miguel Amaya performs like he did second half, I think they're great back there behind the plate.
Looking at the starting pitching situation with the news of the Javier Assad injury to start camp, how concerned are you about where they are with their starting pitching, and how confident are you that they are going to go out and add another starter, whether it be by trade or free agency?
At this point, I'll kind of go in the second part first. It doesn't appear, we saw the starting pitching market just exploded. Everybody other than basically Nick Pivetta, who's kind of hanging out there in that he probably should have taken the qualifying offer the way things are going for him. But we saw these guys getting so much more money, I think, than anybody expected. And that certainly went contrary to what the Cubs were looking for. We're seeing super high asking prices for Dylan Cease and others kind of in that mold. And so I look at it, and obviously that hurts their depth a little bit if you do see Javier Assad, not only him, but then Brandon Birdsell, who was one of their better minor leaguers last year. He's got a non-roster invite to camp. I just wrote something up this morning. While I don't ever want to see anybody injured, regardless of Assad's health, I would much rather see that fifth spot go to Ben Brown.
Why?
I mean, you got a guy who's far different look. I don't need to see five guys in a rotation who all throw 92, 93, who all kind of have similar stuff, similar size. Give me the towering 6'6" guy who had the best curveball in baseball up until the point that he was shut down, and who throws 97 with serious extension that gives him a little bit more perceived velocity. Put Ben Brown in there, and if that's your number 4 or 5, you're doing pretty good.
I'm looking at the NL Central, and the Cubs predicted to take that, and obviously we know where the Dodgers are and everything. What does success look like? Because if I ask my partner Dan here, he's going to say winning the World Series, but I don't believe you have to win the World Series every year to say the season was successful. What do you think success looks like for the Cubs? Or are you in the camp of Dan Bernstein? If you don't win the World Series, it was not a successful season.
I think at this point, given what we've seen, winning the division is the first benchmark. I mean, to me, that's a non-negotiable at this point, right? 83 wins 2 years in a row. You're getting outsmarted, outclassed by the Brewers, who are spending, half as much, doing a much better job with development and acquisition. It's going out and winning the division and then giving yourself a puncher's chance in the National League. Because at this point, again, it's Rocky versus Drago, right? I mean, the Dodgers are coming in there as a juggernaut. You just got to go in there and hope to withstand that. I can't imagine falling short of that, being unsuccessful because of how much they've spent on whom. But the Cubs have to give themselves a chance to get in there and take a few swings. So we've seen that happen before. Like, I would not call the Arizona Diamondbacks from a couple years ago an unsuccessful team, right?
No,
I wouldn't call the Phillies unsuccessful.
We all end up playing semantic games with this. My point being is you got to try to win the World Series, but the problem with the one and done, this whole go for it year, Evan, is we know that with playoff variance that you just need multiple shots at it. Yeah. And the shame of it is in these last 2 seasons,
wasted.
Yes, that these were supposed to be shots. These 83 win seasons, ideally, and they're talking about we didn't get enough overperformance, all that. I don't think you spent enough money on your team, but those 2 years were expected to be part of the competitive window. And when you don't get in the tournament, you lose that chance. And now it feels like it really is down to 1 year where you're hoping for that variance and you were able to get past the Dodgers.
Yeah, it's certainly malpractice, maybe, if we want to call it that, whatever term you want to say, that you went over the luxury tax and couldn't manage more than 83 wins. Right. That to me is a huge indictment. And so, I mean, that's what we're seeing, the change in strategy. But the flip side of that is not only do they have to get in and give themselves a chance, but that's what I'm concerned with a Bregman move, is that you've given yourself that chance finally if you do that. And I think that's what would happen. But again, you run the risk, a very decided risk, of losing him, of losing Kyle Tucker, of losing Presley, who's your presumed closer right now. If you have to trade Nico Horner, right, there's another loss that you've got moving forward. And then who did you bring up who's going to be ready if you didn't give your prospects any run? So I think being able to make a run while setting yourself up to not have to replace half of your production the following season. So those are kind of twofold, and that's the difficult part. Again, we're threading that needle to beat that dead horse, but the success can take many forms. But the first step is that the Cubs absolutely have no business not winning the division and not putting themselves in the position to make a run at it and again have a puncher's chance once they get to the postseason.